Yes, sir. Welcome to Ensayne Comics. I'm your host, Mr. Ensayne himself, Hayden Ensayne. Alright, thank you all for tuning in to the first official episode, because just like the comic industry, I decided to go ahead and complicate my numbering by starting with a 0. And let me tell you guys, I think I recorded that 0 in April or May, and the world has changed, my friends. In some good ways, some bad ways, and I think that holds true in nerddom as well. And one of the biggest changes in comics during my downtime was the split between Diamond and DC Comics. For those unaware, which is probably most of my friends, Diamond has been the sole comic distributor in the US for about 30 years, which means if you own a comic shop, all your product, Marvel, DC, Image, even books from smaller publishers, comes from Diamond. Now, they shut down for a couple months due to a certain global pandemic, and DC are probably AT&T Warner Brothers moved to 2 brand new distributors, both of which are also comic retailers themselves. Now, I'm of two minds about this myself. On one hand, yes, this is bad for the retailers, or at least frustrating for them, especially since A, they weren't given a ton of initial notice at the beginning for their orders, and B, they're having to order from their competitors, which can be really weird, possibly harmful in the future for all we know. But then again, at the same time, I think this could yield some cool stuff in the future. Now, there isn't a monopoly on this. So, we'll see. Now, on a downer note, we unfortunately lost a few important figures in the nerd canon during this time. Denny O'Neil passed away on June 11th. Now, most people associate him with Batman, and that's absolutely warranted. He's a huge element of Batman's DNA. Certainly, when he defined the character with Neil Adams, and I believe he even edited Dark Knight Returns, if I'm not mistaken. For me, though, he's also helped define one of my favorite characters in fiction, Green Arrow, which he also did with Adams, and did that in the pages of Green Lantern and Green Arrow. Honestly, I think Hard Traveling Heroes may be the only Denny O'Neil story I've actually ever read. Though, no, I definitely need to read his question, because I love that character as well. So, also, no comic connection, but on June 19th, we also lost Sir Ian Holm. Now, he'll be remembered by many for his stage work, but for most of us genre nerds, we know him for his amazing roles in Alien and The Fifth Element, and more importantly for people around my age, is Mr. Bilbo Baggins in The Lord of the Rings and an Unexpected Journey, the first Hobbit movie. Again, not comic related, but his performance as Bilbo had such a remarkable effect on me as a kid that I just had to share my appreciation. Although you can make a thin argument that he did do a comic book movie, because Fifth Element is heavily influenced by the French comic of Valerian and Laureline. So hey, there you go. And just today, on the 22nd, director Joel Schumacher died of cancer after a year-long fight. Now, Schumacher directed movies like The Lost Boys, St. Elmo's Fire, and Flatliners. But for comic fans, we remember him for directing Batman Forever and its sequel, Batman and Robin. Now, most people despise those movies, but fortunately or unfortunately, I was in that age where I could appreciate them. And even though they certainly don't hold up even for me now, I think they're an important part of nerd history. And honestly, I wouldn't lay any of those negative feelings for those movies on Schumacher. I think it's been pretty well documented that at least Batman and Robin was made for just about the sole intention of selling toys. But, what are you going to do? And also, for my musical theater kids out there, I learned today that Schumacher actually wrote the screenplay for The Wiz. So that was a pretty neat discovery. So, rest in peace, gentlemen. Thank you so much for the work you left behind. On the lighter side, the Stargirl TV show also started streaming on DC Universe during this time. Maybe one or two had been released before I last recorded, I'm not sure. Now, I haven't actually started watching yet, but I'm actually really interested in seeing it. Now, I was intrigued when I first heard the news about Stargirl, Certainly that Jeff Johns was involved, no less. Yes, sir. But what has really gotten me excited about it is the inclusion of the JSA, especially the new versions of Dr. Midnight and Wildcat. And I'm a big Wildcat fan, so really interested in that. Hopefully I can binge a few episodes when I get some free time. If I ever get some free time. I'm always busy. Now, something I did experience for myself was the first issue of Terry Dodson and Matt Fraction's Adventure Man comic. Now, from my understanding, Adventure Man is a pastiche of Doc Savage. And while I'm a huge fan of pulp and early heroes like Zorro and the Shadow, Lone Ranger, and those guys, I've never actually consumed any Doc Savage stories. But, that being said, I really enjoyed this book. Now, what's really cool about it to me is it utilizes one of my favorite tropes, which is the story within a story. Half of it is the Adventure Man tale, while the other half is about the reader of these pulps. And by the end, of course, the two worlds start to collide. Now, this kind of thing, honestly, it reminds me a little bit of Vertigo books, like Fables and Unwritten. And I guess Sandman, but I gotta be honest, I never actually read those, except for like the first issue. But one day, we'll see. A lot of things to do. But another awesome aspect about this book is the price point. There's like 54, 56 pages, I think. And it's still $3.99, which I really appreciate. So I definitely recommend that one. Now that we're caught up, I've got a few interesting books picked that are coming out this week. Now the whole goal of this section is to pick out a few new titles that I think are worth a read, or just something that strikes my mind as interesting. May not necessarily be something cool to read, but just seems interesting to me that I pointed out. So, for instance, we have Bleed Them Dry #1, created by Hiroshi Koizumi, written by Elliot Rahal, and drawn by Dike Ruan. If I'm saying these names right. And published by Vault Comics. The subtitle of this book is what really caught my attention. Right? A Ninja Vampire Tale. I mean, that's about all I needed, really, to get me stoked for this one. It's also set in the future. Pretty cool. And from the synopsis, seems to have a murder mystery angle as well, which, those are all fantastic ingredients for me. And I haven't read it myself, but if this interests you, there's also a 10-page preview on Bleeding Cool. You want to check that out. I probably won't, honestly. I don't usually read previews. Unless it's in a book I've already got. I typically don't seek out previews. That's true for, other media as well, to be honest. But next we have Rescue 2020, #2, drawn by Jason Burrows, written by Dana Schwartz, and published by Marvel. So this was interesting to me just because I had no idea that it was even coming out. The rescue in question is, of course, Pepper Potts' rescue from Iron Man. I think it's dope that she has her own title, even if it is only a 2-part series. I have to admit, I don't usually like when movie stuff comes back into comics. Of course, Rescue existed in Marvel books before, but her color scheme here is definitely meant to emulate her look in Endgame last year. That's no question. That being said, I do like this blue suit. Certainly more than Star-Lord's suit, for instance, that we had a few years ago after the first Guardians film. I think it's really the corporate synchronization across, the different, all the games and everything have to be the same, seems to me, that I don't really appreciate. But I also have to remind myself that some huge comic characters and ideas came from outside media. Such as, Harley Quinn from Batman the Animated Series, and even Kryptonite originated from the Superman radio show. So they're good things to think about when I have my initial occasional knee-jerk reactions to things that nerds can sometimes have. And this next one was picked for the exact same reason as Rescue. I had no idea it existed. Transformers vs. Terminator #2. Yes, sir. That's right. Art by Alex Milne. Written by John Barber, who I know has been doing Transformers stuff for a few years now. David Marriott and Tom Watts are 3 writers. And co-published by IDW and Dark Horse, I believe. So when I looked on, I can't believe if it was on Previews World or Comixology, I looked at it. It only had IDW, but on the book itself it has IDW, the IDW logo, and the Dark Horse logo. So I don't know if it's just one of them took care of it or both. But I mean, Transformers and Terminator. Enough said. Enough said. What an excellent. I'm definitely going back and find number 1. That's a 4-parter. I'm definitely interested in that. Gonna be reading that. From my understanding, it seems like it's set in the future where the Cybertronians have taken over, and so they send back a Terminator to try and stop it. Yes, sir. I'm into it. Now, also coming out this week is Rick and Morty Presents The Council of Ricks, number 1. Written by Jake Goldman, with art by Philip Murphy, and published by Oni Press. Now, I'm not caught up on the TV series right now, but I love Rick and Morty. And certainly the Council of Ricks is one of my favorite elements of that show. Because, I mean, I just love multiverse stories. And, it also reminds me of Jonathan Hickman's The Council from Fantastic Four, if you ever read those, which is made up of a multiversal team of Reed Richards. So I'm on board with this. Absolute no-brainer. I also need to read, I've only read one issue of the ongoing Rick and Morty from Oni, so I need to check that out. And this next pick is actually one that I probably won't read, to be honest, but the idea of it existing at all fascinates me. That's the Chimerian Red Nails, number 1. It's drawn by Olivier Valentine, written by Regis Hortier, published by Ablaze Publishing, I believe is their full title. So, I had no idea that any other publisher besides Marvel was putting out Conan the Barbarian stuff. So that's neat to me, just that idea. I mean, I don't know, maybe it has something to do with the original stories versus this. Marvel's doing original stories, and this, from my understanding, is a direct adaptation of Robert E. Howard's story. So I don't know if that has something to do with it. I don't know. I thought it was old enough where it wouldn't need like an executor of the estate, the Howard estate, however it works. Anyway, that's interesting to me. Honestly, probably not reading it, but that sounds really interesting. My last pick is the Green Lantern 80th Anniversary 100-page Super Spectacular number 1. That's the full title. At least on Midtown Comics, which happens to be one of those DC distributors under a different name. I believe Lunar, that's what they're called. Written by a ton of people, including Jeff Johns, written and drawn. Jeff Johns, Ivan Reis, Jeff Lemire, ton of other people. And it stars, from my understanding, all of the Human Lanterns. The idea that these characters are getting so old, to me, 80 years, that's super cool to me. I think I was the only one who celebrated, but if you didn't know, Zorro actually turned 100 last year. Just so you know, that's awesome to me. I love that character. Need that film, that Z film that's been talked about for years. But so those are my picks for the week. All of it should be releasing on June 24th. Although some of them, because of this new distribution thing, the Green Lantern book may actually come out on the 23rd for some people. I believe it's actually up to the retailers. So, if you buy from Midtown Comics online, let's say, you can get it Tuesday, the 23rd, which is probably today, if you're listening to it. Quick confession. This was supposed to be every Monday, this series, but already I failed. So it should be coming out Tuesday, hopefully. We'll see. Now, in the future, I may try to limit myself to just picking 5 books. I picked 6 today, so that's not too bad. We'll see. Maybe I could talk a little bit more about them. Maybe talk about what the actual story is supposed to be without giving too much away. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But for now, let's go over a few news topics. And now, the news. And the biggest comic news of the past week that will directly impact comic book shops and even this show for the next couple weeks was the announcement of Free Comic Book Summer. So for those who never experienced it, Free Comic Book Day is a fun event organized by Diamond Distributors, who we just talked about. And that takes place every year on the first Saturday in May. And that's an awesome business opportunity for the shops. Publishers put out a few books that the comic shops decide how to give away. For instance, my shop, Cool Comics in Valdosta, gives customers the choice of 2 books that they can have for free and then offers a discount on other products in the store. On some online stores that I've used in the past, they might give a choice of, one of the Free Comic Book Day books every $10 or so you spend. So, you spend $30, you get 3 books, $40, 4 books, so on, while the supplies last. Unfortunately, thanks to COVID-19, this year's FCBD was canceled. Instead, starting on July 15th, they're replacing Free Comic Book Day with Free Comic Book Summer. So, rather than putting out all the free titles for one event, they're instead releasing 5 free titles every week for 9 or so weeks, I think it is. I guess maybe the thinking is that this might help with limiting the amount of people in the store. I don't know. Or maybe it's just less of a burden for Diamond, possibly. I don't know. But I haven't talked to Andre Oliver, who's the owner of Cool Comics, about this yet, but I'm really curious as to how he plans on working on this. So, if only 5 books are coming out, will he give people the choice of 1 comic per week and ultimately give out up to 10 free comics for the whole event? Or he'll allow all 5 of them given out, which means then he'd be giving out about 50 books. And what about the sale? We do a 2-month-long sale? I don't know. I doubt it. But I definitely hope to finally swing by Cool Comics in the next couple of weeks. So maybe I'll get some info from Andre, so the people in the South Georgia and North Florida area can make the most of this and help support the store as well. That's pretty important, because I know it's definitely hurt him and every shop around the world, every country. Probably the world, shoot. Now, what's useful about this for my show is, since I'll be recommending books every week, I know that for 2 months there's going to be at least 1 comic book that I know you guys will be able to read, because it'll be free. And so, I might list those 5 free comic book summer titles in addition to the 5 picks of quote-unquote, normal books coming out that week. I don't know, we'll see. Now, another point of note, unless I'm mistaken, since Diamond organizes Free Comic Book Day /summer, and DC cut ties with them, maybe there won't be any DC titles among them. I'm pretty certain there won't be. Now, they might put out their own free offerings around that same time, but for the first time, they probably won't have that free comic book banner. Yeah, very interesting times. Now, huge comic book movie news from today, June 22nd, is that Michael Keaton is in talks to reprise his role as Batman in the Ezra Miller Flash movie, which is supposed to come out in 2021. Depending on the state of the world by then. Even though I'm not actually a huge Batman fan, I certainly prefer him in comics, animation, video games over his live-action appearances. I have to admit that it's pretty exciting. It's pretty amazing to me. The idea that they plan to return to Burton's Batman continuity, even if it isn't my favorite, is awesome. And dare I say, comic booky. All I need now is to see Tobey Maguire in Spider-Verse 2, or possibility of an appearance in that Doctor Strange sequel, Multiverse of Madness, or whatever. Because I'm a huge proponent of bringing things back from the past. I love it in comics. I even enjoyed it from what I saw of it. I hadn't seen all of it, but when they did that in CW Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover, nostalgia sells, of course, but when it's handled in a cool way, that's when it's really special in my mind. And also, they're sticking to their guns that this Flash movie will be based on, or at least loosely, on Flashpoint. So that's also interesting. Although I have to say, it might be weird to try and shake up a character or universe that we barely even experienced so far. So far, 1 Flash movie, Justice League, apart from that little useless, in my opinion, we'll see, little cameo he has in Batman vs. Superman. But I gotta tell you, the idea that Keaton could be, and it's not set in stone yet, this is just talking right now, but the idea that he could be included in this, that gives me joy, and I'll take it. I'll take that. Now, the last bit of news is actually old now. In fact, it's been so long that I can't find the link to the article. I saved it, but I've saved so many things since then, I guess it was too difficult to find. So, I'm going to go ahead and apologize if I get any details about this story wrong. But I hope you at least appreciate the gist of what it's about, because it's pretty awesome. Now, from the best of my recollection, at the start of the quarantine, Amanda was helping give out lunches to kids, because, the school shut down. It meant that children who rely on school lunches weren't getting it. That's amazing enough that he was doing this, but what was super neat to me was that he was actually giving out comic books with these lunches, which I think is super special. For one, it offers a little, fun distraction that kids deserve. And who knows that, that could completely change that kid's life. You can turn them into a lifelong reader. It's a little old and definitely detail-free, unfortunately, but I just had to share that. Thought it was awesome. Alright, so if you'll stick around after a quick break, I'm going to kick off our first book club about J. Michael Straczynski's relatively brief but amazing run on Thor. Next week, now, I'll be discussing Reality Check by Glenn Brunswick and Victor Bogdanovic. Oh, yeah, yes, sir. Now, if you'd like to share your thoughts on that, be sure to comment on the Reality Check posts I make on the Ensayne Comics Facebook and Instagram pages. So, JMS Thor right after this. And we're back. Hope you guys dig the little interludes I put in the show. Music is important, just as important a passion for me as sequential art. So I hope to play around with that and incorporate more in the future. Yeah. Anyways, the topic at hand: J. Michael Straczynski's Thor, which was about 17 issues from number 1 to number 12 of Volume 3, or the 2007 series, depending on how you categorize it. And then 600 to 603, which they arrived at by combining the number of the previous volumes, as well as Journey into Mystery, where Thor first appeared. Even though I honestly think they included issues of that series that predate Thor in that numbering, where they would come up with 600. See, I was talking about starting off with a 0? But hey, whatever. Also, there's one shot called Thor Giant Size Finale. And honestly, I'm not even sure if I read that one. I definitely have to rectify that. Most of the art was done by one of my favorites, Olivier Coipel, with a couple arcs by Marko Djurdjevic. Both of whom ran some beautiful, godly stuff. So before I get into some of the neat aspects of the run, I'll give you my personal connection to it. So, before I get into some of the neat aspects of the run, I'll give you my personal connection to it. For one, this series was the very first I followed monthly for more than just a couple issues. Before this, I was reading books at random, so, a toy reprint here, a newsstand there, maybe a variety bag or two. There's only a few series that I had tried following prior to that. One was the Civil War tie-ins to Fantastic Four, which, coincidentally, those were rewritten by Straczynski as well, and even set up Thor. And I kept missing issues, so I finally decided to subscribe to something new, something that just started. And I did that through Marvel.com, straight to Marvel.com, which honestly is really cool. It's fun, like getting a comic in monthly, just in the mail, but I wouldn't recommend it just from a standpoint that they don't package your books very well. So, that's a lot of damage. And some, actually, they are good about replacing stuff that gets damaged, but, I don't know. But I picked a series with a character that I like from cartoons and such, but hadn't really read anything from, and that was The Mighty Thor. Now, unfortunately, that subscription started with number 3, and it would actually be a decent while before I ever picked up 1 and 2. I actually don't even know how much I remember about 1 and 2, but I read the other ones so much. Like number 3, that was a special one. So, I haven't read the series leading up to this one, but from, my understanding from reading that one, that Ragnarok took place, right? That all the Norse gods died. And so at the beginning of this, it's all about, resurrection. Thor's going, I forget how he comes. He kind of comes back in a weird way. See, like I said, I've read number 1 and 2, but they're not as clear in my mind, because I read the other ones in an important time. So Thor's back, and he's going around to try to resurrect the god. So what's happened, however much you know about Thor, he used to have an alter ego named Don Blake. And since around the time of the movies, they kind of got rid of him. There's a little joke in the first Thor movie, but they haven't messed with that alter ego. Basically, lame, a crippled Don Blake finds a stick, and it happens to be a hammer. It's magic Mjolnir, and then becomes Thor. And they're kind of the same person, but as time went on, they made them kind of separate people. And so what's happened, Don Blake is out running around, and then finds Thor again, basically, and becomes Thor. And so he's awoken. And so now he's going around America and the world, finding dormant gods, basically. And so in this number 3, he goes to New Orleans. And so this is in 2007, which is after a couple of things, right? So one, in the comics, the Civil War has just taken place over the Superhuman Registration Act. And in the real world, Hurricane Katrina had, ravaged New Orleans and that surrounding area. And so he actually goes to New Orleans. And it's a question, it's similar to what Straczynski did during 9/11, is, when you have a real world and real terrible things happen, and then you have superheroes who should be able to stop that, even though obviously it didn't happen, because in the real world we don't. We don't have people to save us like that. It begs the question, is like, well, why didn't anybody come and stop this? And what it was is they were fighting each other. So there's a guy hanging around New Orleans who's just mad at everyone because, nobody helped. And it turns out by the end of that story, you realize it's actually, what's his name? Oh no, Heimdall, of course. And he's awoken. He's the first one. And then through him, he is able to find the others. So basically, this, to me, it becomes like an unlocking of all these guys. And so it's a great first introduction for somebody who doesn't know anything about Thor. You're learning as they learn themselves again. And that becomes true because Asgard is brought back as well, and it's over a town in, where is it? It's in the Midwest somewhere. I can't remember where it is. And they did this a little bit in Endgame, a similar thing. I can't remember, but that is interesting because the Asgardians are part of it, a part of their world, like going to town meetings and stuff, and then the Asgardians are defending them from craziness. But that's really cool. But number 3, though, I highlighted that one, is how Thor deals with Iron Man. So, this is after, if you don't remember, if you don't know, during Civil War, when Thor's dead, Iron Man and a few other scientist types, Reed Richards, I can't remember, maybe Hank Pym was a part of that, I don't remember. But they make a cyborg clone of Thor, unfortunately called Ragnarok. And he actually kills Bill Foster, Goliath. And so when Thor comes back, he's angry at Iron Man for this. And he's like, thing is, he's not even wanting to take any sides between them. That's the thing. But unfortunately, Iron Man has crossed him personally, so they get into it, they battle. And Iron Man's kind of surprised, but we see some awesome feats of strength from Thor. And Iron Man's surprised about it, and basically telling him, I'm not holding back from this anymore. There's a beautiful scene where he's telling Iron Man to get out of there, basically saying, you learn the difference between a god of thunder and a mortal man in a metal suit. And I don't know if you said the little visor piece that Iron Man has, that pops open, the gold piece. He like pinches that and rips it off. Pretty fantastic. But that's a really good series to learn about Asgard and stuff. And there's some really cool stuff with Balder. He's kind of put in the forefront. He kind of becomes the leader by the end of it. And there's a great romance between one of the people who live in the town around Asgard, who falls in love with one of the Asgardian goddesses. And speaking of Asgardian goddesses, this is when Loki becomes a woman for most of it. I don't remember when it changes, if it ever does, at what point that happened. But yeah, man, that's Michael Straczynski's Thor. Very good read. Brief, like I said, but important to me. It's the first thing I was following monthly. I was reading it even past Straczynski. So Kieran Gillen came on, picked up some cool stuff. He did some cool stuff with during the Siege time, if you know about those. When they attack Asgard. Beautiful. And then I didn't read much of Matt Fraction's, which he did Mighty Thor, I believe it was, or one of them after that led to it. And then it wasn't until Jason Aaron was writing that I came back to Thor. That's interesting. I mean, since Mr. Straczynski has become one of my favorite writers. I love his stuff. I love Supreme Power, which is a take on Squadron Supreme. That'll probably be one of our book clubs in the future. That's a really good one. And of course I haven't watched it, but he's the creator and writer of Babylon 5. So I have to check that out eventually. I'm trying to think of some good Straczynski comics that I liked. That Fantastic Four run, of course. Beautiful. He has a run on Spider-Man that some people like, some people don't. I haven't got to it. I'm definitely planning to. So that's going to do it for this book club and for the episode. Remember, next time we're going to look at Reality Check. I hope it gets a little bit more in depth. I keep trying to decide how much of story I want to share. Any thoughts you guys have? How much I should do? And hopefully pretty soon in the next couple weeks I'll have someone on, at least for the book club part. Just so I have some of their ideas. But the hope would be that I would read something with somebody who has fresh eyes on it, so they can give a different perspective. But don't forget, look at Ensayne Comics on Facebook and Instagram to look at the Reality Check post that should be there. At least in the next couple of days. So share your thoughts on that. You have a week to read it, or thereabouts. So anyway, thanks again so much for listening to Ensayne Comics. I'm Hayden Sane, and I have no outro little thing, so just jam to the tunes. Thank you so much.